Okay, let's dive right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going to completely unpack the deeply esoteric teachings of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Now, this isn't just about passive belief. What we're looking at is a fascinating, almost psychological framework for spiritual awakening. It's an intense, highly active process of self-liberation, and honestly, it's a total game changer. So, you might be wondering, what is the core mystery we're actually unraveling today? It boils down to this. Why do so many of us feel stuck in a lower state of awareness? And more importantly, how do we get out? Well, ancient Gnostic secrets suggest that human consciousness is essentially locked down by these invisible forces. We're talking about habits, illusions, and systemic oppression that keep us totally blind to our own true potential. To pull off the ultimate escape, we have to understand the specific locks on our own minds. The source text, that's a really compelling scene. Picture this. Jesus has just departed, and the traditional disciples are, frankly, panicking. They are terrified of what's going to happen next. But Mary Magdalene steps right up as the true successor. She calms everyone down and drops this profound secret. The Christ we're all desperately seeking is actually a divine principle living inside each and every one of us. She completely shifts the paradigm here. You don't look outside for a savior. You have to look within and awaken that principle yourself. To actually find that inner divinity, we are given our first major tool for escape. Instead of letting our human logic and our divine intuition act like bitter enemies, we have to marry them. The source uses a really helpful analogy for this. Think of the soul as your left brain functions, your logic, analytical skills, and your ego consciousness. Then think of the spirit as your right brain functions, your intuition, big picture thinking, and connection to your higher self. Most people lean way too heavily on one and completely ignore the other. But to see reality clearly, these two seemingly opposing forces absolutely must be unified. The thing is, you don't perceive deep truth with just cold logic or just vague intuition. You have to build a bridge. And this gives rise to what the text calls the mind between, which is a completely new state of higher consciousness. When Mary asks how someone actually perceives a divine vision, the answer she gets is that it's the mind between the soul and spirit that sees it. You literally have to train your psyche, integrating those underdeveloped parts of yourself to give rise to this profound, unifying clarity. But, and there's always a catch, right? As your consciousness starts to ascend, it triggers an epic internal battle. You awaken the archons. In this philosophical system, archons are basically psychological rulers, personified forces of oppression that desperately want to keep you trapped in the dark. Think of them as cosmic prison guards. The second you start trying to improve yourself or elevate your awareness, these forces step right in to block your path and anchor you back down. The text describes the soul's ascent as essentially a series of psychological boss battles. You must deliberately fight your way past the forces of darkness, desire, and ignorance. Enlightenment, according to this framework, is not automatic. You don't just read a book and magically ascend to the heavens. No, you have to actively confront and outsmart these specific inner blocks, one by one. Let's look at the first major confrontation. When you try to rise, the archon of desire acts like a toxic anchor. It claims total ownership over your lower urges and habits, literally telling the soul, "You belong to me. You aren't going anywhere." This represents that sticky web of cravings, addictions, and attachments that try to rule us. And it's really important to note, the text doesn't say all desire is bad. Desire is just fuel. But when desire rules you, it becomes an archon holding you prisoner. But the soul achieves an absolute triumph here. It looks right at the archon and basically says, "I see exactly what you're trying to do, but you don't even recognize my true nature." By seeing desire simply as an external force pulling at its metaphorical clothes, the soul completely strips the archon of its power. Desire is just a garment, and the soul refuses to be controlled by it, casually continuing its upward journey. Okay, so you beat desire. Next up, the soul faces an arguably deadlier enemy in ignorance. This archon tries to mentally chain you down by shaming you into believing you are fundamentally wicked and broken. Ignorance is so much more insidious than desire. It attacks the soul with heavy, heavy judgment, claiming you're just too sinful and flawed to ever ascend. Think about it. If an oppressive system can convince you that you're fundamentally broken through toxic shame, you will literally never even attempt to look for the divinity inside yourself. I absolutely love the soul's response here. It's so profound. It realizes that simply being trapped in an illusion isn't actually a sin. The true wickedness is forcing that blindness onto others. So the soul claps back at ignorance, stating, "Why do you judge me? I was bound, but I haven't bound anyone." It acknowledges, yeah, I used to be trapped in a lower state of consciousness, but being the victim of an illusion isn't a moral failing. The soul flat out refuses to accept the toxic shame being projected onto it. Just when you think you're in the clear after beating those individual bosses, the soul has to face an ultimate terrifying threat. Exactly 7 interlocking powers. This is the final roadblock before true liberation. We're no longer just talking about a single weakness attacking the mind. This is a massive, coordinated system designed specifically to crush awakening consciousness. These individual forces basically combine into an aggressive, psychological megazord from hell. It's a unified, systematic machine of oppression. The text calls this entity the 7 powers of wrath. It includes darkness, concealing the truth, foolish wisdom that makes total falsehoods sound enlightened, and the wisdom of anger that makes people fiercely attack anything that challenges their worldview. They all reinforce one another perfectly to ensure you stay fast asleep. So this unified final boss hurls a really intense accusation. They literally call the soul a murderer, because it is completely destroying the systemic illusions that once controlled it. To the forces of oppression, someone breaking free and dismantling the system looks like pure destruction. But they also call the soul a conqueror of space, which honestly is an incredible title. It acknowledges that the soul has realized it's an eternal entity of light and is no longer bound by mere physical limitations or the rules of the material matrix. And here is the ultimate victory of this hero's journey. The soul proudly accepts its title as a destroyer of chains. It replies fearlessly, confirming, "Yes, I have killed what once bound me. The illusions are dead, the ignorance has died." The soul fully understands that its true nature originates from a completely higher order of reality, and those temporary chains of forgetfulness, they don't hold any power whatsoever anymore. Now, here is a massive plot twist. The goal of this Gnostic text isn't actually to physically flee the material world. It's to transcend our lower consciousness so we can actively transform reality right here. A really common misconception is that this philosophy hates the physical world and just wants to abandon ship. But according to the source material, the Earth isn't some evil torture dungeon to be escaped. It's a domain that desperately needs to be transformed. We are meant to bring that higher kingdom down here. Think of it like a video game. You literally cannot just use a cheat code to skip to the end to escape your problems. If you check out of reality, you're just going to keep respawning in the exact same spot because you haven't done the actual work. You have to awaken your internal potential, do the heavy lifting of confronting your inner demons, and then use that brand new, integrated clarity to reshape your environment. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a challenge based on the texts we've explored today. Are you ready to marry your opposites, do the hard work of building that mind between, and finally face your inner archons? Or will you just let the forces of desire, ignorance, and anger push the respawn button on your consciousness forever? The roadmap for liberation is right in front of us, but the text makes one thing absolutely clear. No one else can walk this path for you.